Hey, what's up, friends? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Samach Beis, Daf 62 of Masechta Yoma. Daf 62, multiple azazels. That's fun, right? If you have, multiple azazel goats. So, how does that work? We'll get there. Just a sec. Then we start a new parak. Which parak? The sixth parak, 6 of 8. Not bad. Moving along. Same? What the heck does same mean? Oh, yeah, exactly. The goats of Yom Kippur, the Sar Lashem and the Sar Lazazel, we want them to be similar, to look similar, to have similar value. And towards the end we get into the sugya of Shchutei Chutz, when you slaughter kachim outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So what happens if you slaughter the goats of Yom Kippur outside of the Hazara? So, Chever, that's what we have on today's daf. Let's get started on Samach Aleph Mud Beis. Where do we start? Who can tell me where we start? About 2, 4, 6, 7 lines from the bottom. So it says Tanan Hasam, but the Gra changes it to Tanur Rabbanon. Let's go Tanur Rabbanon. V'chulam metamim begadim v'nisrafin abeis hadeshen. Divra Belazar Reb Shimon. V'chacham omim emitam begadim v'nisafan abeis hadeshen ela achrin ho v'gamar bo kapara. Aha! Heavy, you got that? Let's read that again. Tanur Rabbanan v'chulan mitamim begadim. All of them make your clothing tameh v'nisafan abeis hadeshen and are burnt by the beis hadeshen. What is this talking about? It's talking about when you have multiple sa'ir lashems. Because we've been discussing what happens if the blood spills out on the floor at a certain point. So let's say he did the whole blood thing in the Kodesh HaKodashim, and then blood spills out on the floor, so we have to slaughter another cow, let's say, and bring its blood, and then you'll sprinkle it by the parochas. What happens if after that it spills on the floor? So now you got to bring a third cow and take its blood, and then you'll put that on the mizbeach. So now what do you do with these 3 cows, Lamaisa? So, right, because now you have 3 dead cows that use their blood for the different stages, but what do you do with them? So, it says, this Bryce of V'chulam Etaman Begadim, V'nisofan Abeis Hadesh, and Divra Belazar Reb Shimon. So, according to Belazar Reb Shimon, all 3 of them, you schlep outside of, as Rashi points out, all 3 encampments, so outside of the Machna Yisrael even, and you burn them there, and the Kohen who burns, I think it's the Kohen who burns it. Certainly whoever burns it needs to wash his clothing, and then he becomes tameh until the evening. Okay, so so all of these animals that were slaughtered in order to use their blood in the service of Yom Kippur, so these animals you schlep outside of the Shalosh Machnos, you burn them there, and whoever burns them, his clothing becomes tameh, and I think I said that he's tameh till the evening. I'm not sure about that, but his clothing is tameh. Okay, fine. Machacham Omer, as the Chacham say, Eimetam begadim v'nisafan abeis hadeshen ela achron ho v'gamar bo kapara. Whereas the Chacham's opinion is that it's only the last one. Meaning, if you had 1 cow, you slaughtered it, used its blood in the Kodesh HaKodashim, then it spilled on the floor. So you took another cow, used its blood by the parochas, then it spilled on the floor. So then you took a third cow, and used its blood for the mizbeach. So, according to the Chacham, you would only schlep out the last cow to the Beis Hadeshen, and the person who burns it, his clothing becomes tameh. So that only applies to the last cow, since, what do you say? Hoil v'gomer bo kapara. Since the kapara, the atonement, was completed with the last cow, or I imagine it could be a goat as well, if need be. So the last one is what you burn, and the fellow who burns it becomes tameh. Alright, sounds fun. Ba'amine Rava Rav Nachman, Rava asked a kasha from his Rebbe Rav Nachman, Kamasir Mishaleach. You hear that, friends? So, you hear that, friends? You hear it, right? What happens in these cases that we've been talking about? Meaning, when the blood spills on the floor and you have to bring a new animal, because each animal. Interesting. So this really would be shaykh to the goats, right? So if you had a goat l'Hashem, and then after the Kodesh Kodashim it spills on the floor, so you bring a second one, and after the Parochos it spills on the floor, so you bring a third one. Now you have 3 dead goats. Now each time you brought a new goat, you had to do new lotteries. You hear that? So basically what would happen is, you had your first pair, you had your 2 goats, then you drew lotteries. One of them went L'Hashem, the other one went L'Azazel. They slaughter the goat that's L'Hashem, they brought its blood into the Kodesh HaKodashim, they did the avodah in the Kodesh HaKodashim, then it spilled on the floor. So it spilled on the blood spilled on the floor, you don't have any blood anymore. So you have to bring a new goat. We don't just bring one goat, you bring 2 new goats, and you make new lotteries, and now one of them is L'Hashem, one of them is L'Azazel. And then you take the one that's L'Hashem, you slaughter it, you use its blood by the Parochos. If that spills on the floor, now you bring another 2 goats, and you do another lottery. One of them is L'Hashem, one of them is L'Azazel, the one that's L'Hashem, you slaughter and you use its blood for the Mizbeach now. Now at this point, in this scenario, you have 3 goats that are L'Azazel. 3 goats to drop off a cliff. So, what do? Do you take all 3 of them? Do you take one of them? Chaver, what do you think? So, Ba'amini Rav Mir Rav Nachman Kamasir Mishalech. How many goats, in this case, do you drop off a cliff? Omerle. Rav Nachman responds to Rav, V'chiyidro Mishalech. Well, you want him to send the whole flock? 1. Omerlo. V'chiyidro Soref. To which Rav responds, what do you mean? It's not such a silly question. I mean, would we expect him to burn his entire flock? And yet, we see the opinion of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon that you would schlep out all of the goats or cows mistama outside of the camp and burn them. So just like you would schlep out all the animals to burn them, I could argue that let's also send all of the azazels that we have to be dropped off a cliff, l'maisa. So midami, to which the Gemara says, come on, apples and oranges. Hasam lo ksivoso, acha ksivoso. When it comes to the goats, L'Hashem, it doesn't say oso, it, one specifically. Whereas in the context of L'Azazel, it says l'shalach oso L'Azazel, to send it L'Azazel, implying that you're only sending 1, not more than that. Okay, so therefore, we would only send 1 of the goats to be dropped off a cliff. Itmar Papi Mishmei Derava Amar Rishon Mishalech, Rav Shimon Mishmei Derava Amar Achron Mishalech. So now the question is, which one do you drop off the cliff? Do you drop off the first one? Do you drop off the last one? So we see it's taka a machlokas. Rav Papi Mishmei Derava Amar. I'm reading again Rishon Mishalech. So it says Rav Papi in the name of Rava that you drop the first goat off the cliff. Rav Shimon Mishmei Derava Amar Achron Mishalech. Whereas Rav Shimi says the name of Rava that you drop off the last one off the cliff. Now says the Gemara, I have an easier time understanding the opinion, the position of Rav Shimi in the name of Rava, who says that you drop the last of the Azazel goats off the cliff. I get it. Because that's the goat that basically made it past the finish line. Right? It was the last pair of goats in this scenario that you slaughtered the one that was L'Hashem, and you used its blood on the Mizbeach and sort of completed the avodah with it. So its counterpart, that's L'Azazel, is the one that you drop off the cliff. This is the pair that we end that takes us past the finish line. But according to Rav Papi in the name of Rava, who says that Yitaka dropped the first goat off the cliff, why? The first goat is old news. Its counterpart, that was L'Hashem, its blood spilled on the floor, it was replaced with a new one. So therefore, a puppy, in the name of Rava, how come he's saying that the first goat you drop off the cliff? The first one's old news. So Savila Krib Yosi da mitzvah barishin. You hear that, friends? Rav Papi in the name of Rava holds like Reb Yossi, whose opinion is mitzvah barishon. That it's preferable, it's a mitzvah to use the first one. Hey Reb Yossi, where does Reb Yossi say that it's a mitzvah to use the first one? Ilema, Rabbi Yossi the kupis, if you're going to say that it's Rabbi Yossi by the kupis from Masechta Shkolim. The Tanan is we learn in the Mishnah Masechta Shkolim, shalosh kupis, shalosh sayin, shebayim tarminas alishka. That right, everybody would do their give their machzis shekels, and then at 3 times in the year, torminas alishka. They would move all the shekels into this lishka, into this office, and then they would put them into 3 boxes. And on each of the boxes were written Aleph, Beis, and Gimel respectively. One box said Aleph, the other one said Beis, the other one said Gimel. V'tanya, and we learned in the Brayso, so Rabbi Yossi, Lama Kosav Alein Aleph, Beis, Gimel. Says Rabbi Yossi, how come they had to label them? Leda Ezemeh Nisum Rishon. So Rabbi Yossi says, so that you'll know which one was Trumad first. To know that when they took the coins and put them in the boxes, which was the box that got filled up first. So that you'll use the money in the first box for purchasing korbanis, since it's a mitzvah to use the first one. So you see that Rabbi Yossi's opinion is mitzvah barishon, that it's preferable to use the first one, as we see by this kupis in the context of the shkalim. So therefore, based on this, Rav Papi says in the name of Rava, that when you have these 3 potential goats to drop off a cliff, drop the first one off the cliff because mitzvah barishon, preferable to use the first one. But the Gemara, Dilma ba'idna deis chazoi kam. Did I skip? No. Dilma ba'idna deis chazoi kamaisa los chazoi basraisa. You hear that? Maybe they're different. Because when it comes to the shkolim, the boxes that they would put the shkolim in, so once they filled up the first box was ready to go, even though the box 2 and 3 haven't yet been set up. The money hasn't yet been put in box 2 and 3, but once you fill up box 1, it's ready to go. And therefore I can understand why Rabbi Yossi would say that it's a mitzvah barishon, that preferable to use the first one, since the first one was ready to go before the other 2 were ready to go. However, by the goats only become ready to be dropped off the cliff once all of the avoda with the Saril Hashem is complete. Which means that when you had the first pair, and you designated one Hashem, one Azazel, and you were doing the blood work in the Kodesh HaKodashim with the Saril Hashem, the Saril Azazel wasn't yet ready to be dropped off the cliff because the avoda wasn't yet complete. And then when the blood spilled on the floor and you brought another pair, and you were throwing the blood of the Saril Hashem in by the paroches, again, the second Lazazel goat was still not ready to be dropped off a cliff because the avoda was not yet complete. Only once the third pair was brought and the blood of the Saril Hashem was put on the Mizbeach, at that point is the avoda considered complete. And at that point, now we take a look at our Saril Azazels and we say, wait, we now have 3 goats that we could potentially drop off a cliff. Which one do we use? But all 3 of them only potentially become usable only at the time, only once the avoda of Yom Kippur, all the blood work of the Saril Hashem has been complete. Until then, none of them are ready to be dropped off a cliff. And therefore, it's not like the first Saril Azazel was ready to be dropped off a cliff before the other 2. All of them sort of became ready to be dropped off at the same time. So therefore, who says that Rabbi Yossi would necessarily say that it's a mitzvah barishon? I understand by the Trumas Halishka, the first box to get filled up was ready to be used, even though the other 2 hadn't yet been filled up. But when it comes to the goats, they all become droppable as at the same exact time. So we don't know that Rabbi Yossi would say Darton that you would memela use the first one. And Rabbi Yossi the Pesach. So says the officer. The Gemara suggests what about this? Rabbi Yossi's opinion in the context of Korban Pesach, the Tanya, Hamafrish Pischo ve'ovad. Wow. Fun sugyas. End of the 9th parak of Masechta Pesachim. Tamuras. A fellow sets aside an animal to be his Korban Pesach, and it got lost. It didn't want to be a Korban Pesach. What else did it want to be? I'm not sure. So amafish pischo v'avad. So if you have a fellow who set aside an animal to be a korban pesach and it got lost, so he set aside a different animal to be a korban pesach. And now you find the first one. So now you have two potential korban pesach. And now you have two korban pesachs that are fit to be offered. So the Chacham say, look, choose one and offer that. You can use whichever one you want. Rabbi Yossi Omer mitzvah barishin. Rabbi Yossi says it's preferable to use the first one. And then he points out, but if the second one was nicer than the first one, so use the second one. But what do we see? So we see that Rabbi Yossi's opinion is that all things equal, it's preferable to use the first one. Now this is a case, when it comes to the Korban Pesach, of course we know that the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, Midoraisa, really only kicks in after Chatzos. Which means, you had set aside an animal for your Korban Pesach. It got lost. You then designated a different one. Neither one was ready to be offered until Chatzos of Erev Pesach. Now, you had set aside your first animal, it got lost. You set aside a second one to replace it. Now you found the first one. Comes Chatzos of Erev Pesach, you now have been, right away now, at the same time, you have these two animals that could be that you could use as a korban pesach. Now, before chatzos, neither one was usable because it wasn't yet chatzos. It wasn't yet a mitzvah to do the korban pesach. Only once chatzos comes, all of a sudden now you have two potential animals to bring as a korban pesach. Rabbi Yossi says use the first one. Boom. So we see that in our case also, when you have the multiple goats that could be dropped off a cliff, so we see that even though they all become droppable at the same time, i.e., once the avoda is complete with the Sar Hashem, nonetheless, says Rav Papi in the name of Rava, that he holds like Rabbi Yossi, who would maintain that you would drop the first one off the cliff because mitzvah barishin. Givaldik. Hadron Allah Chotziulo, we will come back to you, Perik Chotziulo. And now we begin the sixth parak. Shnei Seirei Yom Kippurim, the two goats for Yom Kippur, the Sar Hashem and the Sar Azazel. Mitzvasen Shiyu Shnei and Shavin, so they should be similar. B'mare, in their appearance, uv'koma, in their height, uv'damim, their value, uv'kichasun ke'echad, you should buy them at the same time. V'afal pi she'ein Shavin ksherin, and says the Mishnah, but you know what? Even if they're not, exactly alike, it's still kosher. And even though we said that you should buy them together, if you bought one today, one tomorrow, it's also okay. You hear this, friends? So you have these two goats. You bought them, you set them aside. They were going to be, one of them was going to be Lashem, one of them was going to be Lazazel. One of them dies. So if the one that died before the lottery, so before it was determined which one was Lashem and which one was Lazazel, Yikach Zug Lasheni. So just push it, bring one more goat, and now you have two. You haven't yet done the lotteries, so just replace the one that died, and that's that. However, if the goat died after already the lottery and after it was determined which one is Lashem and which one is Lazazel, Yavizug Acher. So now you bring another pair, as we were saying earlier. V'yagul aleim batchila, and now you do a whole new lottery with the new pair. So again, you had initially brought one pair, you did a lottery, you determined which one of them was Lashem, one of them was Lazazel, and then one of them died. Either the Lashem or the Lazazel, one of them died. So what you do is, you bring two new goats, and you do a new lottery, and once again you determine which one is going to be Lashem and which one is going to be Lazazel. V'yomar, and he says Lemaisa, im shel shem meis. So in the event that that we're talking about where the Sar Lashem is the one that died, so zeh Allah olav agor Lashem is kaim tachta. So in the event that it was the goat, meaning we know which one died, right? Meaning he brought two goats initially, he did a lottery, determine which one is Lashem, which one was Lazazel. So in the event that the Sari that's Lashem died, so he now brings 2 new goats, does a new lottery. One of them in Mela is going to be Lashem, one of them is going to be Lazazel. He says, okay, this one that is Lashem is to replace the one that was initially Lashem that died. Vim shel Azazel meis, and if the goat that died was the goat that was Lazazel, Zesha Allah Olav Agorel, Lazazel Iskayim Tachtav. So then, the goat from the new pair that he brought, that was determined through the lottery to be Lazazel, will replace the initial Azazel goat that died. And now what do you do with the extra one? Right? Meaning one goat from the first pair died, we now brought 2 more goats to replace them. We really only need one of the 2 goats to be the replacement, so now you have an extra one, right? If the Sar Lashem is the one that died, and you replaced it from one of the new ones, well now then you have 2 Lazazels. And if the Sar Lazazel died, so now you have 2 Saris Lashems. So the Mishnah says that the extra one, it doesn't say which one is the extra one, the Gemara is going to ask, but the extra one, so Yira Achi Yistav Yimachav Yiplu Damav L'Nedava. So we know about this. So the extra one just grazes until it gets a mum. Once it gets a mum, you sell it. Its money now takes on its holy value, and the animal now you can slaughter and eat once it has a mum. She'ein chatas tzibur mesa, because a chatas atzibur, a communal offering, does not die. Right? We've also learned a few times that there are certain cases where a korban chatas, for example, if its owners die. So there are these cases where the chatas, you just push it, starve it to death, l'maisa. So, but that does not apply to korban tziburs, and therefore, this extra goat, we don't starve to death, we just let it graze until it gets a mum. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Thomas. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, l'maisa, this extra one, you just starve it to death. V'od Omer Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda also said, Nishbach Adam, Yoma Mishtaleach, that in the event that, let's say, you have the 2 goats, one Lashem, one Lazazel, and the blood of the Sari Lashem at some point spills on the floor. So the Sari that you had set aside Lazazel, you have to kill. Meisa Mishtaleach Yishavech Adam. And if the Sari Mishtaleach dies, well then the blood of the Sari Lashem that you're using, you gotta spill on the floor. Okay. Says the Gemara Tanu Rabboni. The Gemara says the rabbis taught, Yikach shnei seirei izim, that the pasuk says that on Yom Kippur we take shnei seirei izim, 2 goats. Now, fact the Gemara, miut seirei shnayim, mata melomar shnei. You hear that, friends? The Gemara points out that the minimum of seirei, which is plural, is memela 2. So I don't need it to say shnei seirei izim, just say seirei izim, goats. And mimele, I know that the minimum number of goats is 2, so I have it. And I can know that it's 2 goats even without writing 2. So why write 2? Matam lomer shnei. So then how come it says 2 goats? I could just know that on my own. Sheyiu shneim shavin. Period. That they should be the same, like we saw in our Mishnah. That the reason why it says shnei is to teach that both of them should look similar, it should have the similar height, similar value. Now how do I know that even in the event where they don't look alike, it's okay? So the pasuk says, in the context of Yom Kippur, sa'ir twice, riba, to include, even if they don't look alike, it's still okay. Time Rabbi Rachmana, hello Rabbi Rachmana, havamina psulin. Fact the Gemara, wait a second. So let's get this logic straight. So basically the pasuk says shnei, to say that the goats should be similar. But it also says sa'ir sa'ir. And because it says sa'ir sa'ir, riba, to include, that is how we know that even if they don't look alike, it's still okay. The implication being that if we didn't have sa'ir, if we didn't have this riboy to say that even if they don't look alike, it's still okay, the assumption is that I would have had the havamina to think otherwise, that without sa'ir, that if they look different, it would be a problem. But because of sa'ir, it's okay. Ikuv minolan. Why should that be? Like, where do we learn out that this should be the case? What makes us think that this idea of shnei, to say that they have to look similar, is something that's ma'akev? That if they look different, it'll be a big problem. That we need sa'ir to say, no, don't worry about it. Why should I think that like it's something that is ma'akev? So the Gemara says, well, the pasuk says in the context of the Sarah of Yom Kippurim, Shnei 3 times. So I might have had the havamina to say, well, it says Shnei 3 times. The Torah means business. The Torah is pretty serious about the fact that these goats need to mamish be the same. And therefore I would have had the havamina to say that if they look different, it's a problem. Therefore the pasuk said, Sa'ir, riba, to say no, even if they look different, it's okay. But now that the Torah says sa'ir, to say it's okay if they're different, well then how come it says shnei 3 times, which implies that it's not okay if they're different? It says shnei 3 times because one is saying that ideally they should look similar, ideally they should have a similar stature, and ideally they should have the same monetary value. But if they don't, it's okay because sorry riba. Givaldik. Everybody got that? Lemaise, what it means is that you should try to get goats that look similar, but if they don't look similar, it's still okay. Now we're going to apply this to 2 more cases. It's mamish the same mahalach. We're going to apply to 2 more cases. We also learn like this in the context of the sheep of a mitzorah. Of course, the mitzorah on day 8 of his purification process, so he brings 3 sheep. So 2 keveses and 1 kivsa. The 2 keveses, one is in asham and one is a chatas, and then I think that's correct. And then the kivsa I think is an ola. Did I get that right? I hope so. Akoponim. So it says that there's these 2 keveses. So Tanami Gabe Kivse, meaning 2 keveses and 1 kivsa. So it says also by the 2 keveses of the Mitzorah, Yikach Shnei Kvasim, that he should take 2 keveses. Miut Kvasim Shnei, Matam Lo Shnei. So Memele Kvasim is 2. His plural is, which the minimum of plural is 2. So why does it say Shnei? Memele, I know it's 2. Why does it have to say Shnei? Shiyu Shnei and Shavin. Well, these 2 sheep should look similar. Uminayin Shaf Api Shein Shnei and Shavin Ksherin. How do I know that even if they're not the same, it's still okay? Tamloma keves riba. Well, therefore it says keves twice to say even if they're not the same, it's okay. Time of Rabbi Rachmana, hello Rabbi Rachmana, have mina psulin. To which the Gemara says, wait, so only because it says keves twice to include that even if they look different, it's okay. If it would not have said keves twice, then I would think that it's a big problem if they look different. Ikuv minalan. What makes you think that? Where do you see that this should be a game stopper? Or showstopper? Whatever. Well, I would have thought to say Tiye ksiv. Well, it says those Tiye Torah Mitzorah B'Yom Ta'araso. So Tiye, it should be like this, I may have thought to say. To say that if they look different, it's a big problem. Now the Gemara says, okay, but now that we have keves to say that even if they look different, it's okay, so why do I have the word tiyeh, which implies that it has to be a specific way? L'shar vayoso, shom mitzorah. But the other halachas of mitzorah, they have to be exact. But these sheep that he brings, if they look different, it's okay. Alright. V'tananami gabi mitzorah, gabi tzipori mitzorah. Ki gabna. We also have a similar mahalach when it comes to the birds. that a Mitzorah brings. Now these birds are on the day that the Mitzorah becomes, no longer, finishes his afflictions, his tsaras. Right? Now we've seen a number of times the Kine Mitzorah, which is basically like the Kine Yoledes and the Kine Zavim, that is if the Mitzorah cannot afford to bring sheep, the sheep that we were just discussing, so then he could bring 2 birds, one lechatas, one ola. This is not what we're talking about right now. What we're talking about right now is a week earlier. On the day that the Mitzorah stops having tsaras, so on that day, immediately there are 2 birds that are brought. One of them is killed, then you take the other bird, and the eitz erish, nitulas, you dip it in the blood, the whole thing. So we're talking about these birds. On day 1, on the first day of his purification process, Tziporim, miut tziporim, shtayim atam lo mashtei. So the Gemara says, wait, tziporim is plural. So why do I need it to say 2? Memele, tziporim, the minimum of tziporim is 2. So I don't need it to say 2. Shiyu shtein shavos. Well, they should look the same. U'minayin shavu pishein shavos, ksheros. How do I know that even if they don't look exactly the same, it's okay? Well, the pasuk says tzipor twice to say that even if they don't look the same, it's beseder. Time of Rabbi Rachmana, hello Rabbi Rachmana, psulos, question mark. To which the Gemara says, wait, so the only reason why, if they look different, it's okay, is because it says tzipor twice, implying that if it didn't say tzipor twice, I would think that it's a big deal, and if they don't look exactly alike, you're in trouble. Ikuvim and Alon. What makes us think that the requirement for them to be alike is a showstopper? So the Gemara says, well, Sakadaiti Chamina, I may have thought to say, Ti Eksiv, right? Of course, as we said the other, a few minutes ago, that the pasuk says, those Ti, now I'm forgetting the word, Torah B'Yom Torah also. So I may think it has to be this way, and if they look different, then it's a problem. Right, and therefore it says tzipor to say no, even if they look different, it's okay. So frek the Gemara, now that we have the limud of tzipor to say that even if they look different, it's okay. So then how come we have tiyeh, which would imply that they would have to be similar? So the shar v'yosel shel mitzorah, that's regarding the other halachas of mitzorah that they would have to that there's ma'akev. Okay? How you guys doing? Good, right? So now frek the Gemara. So we just gave 3 examples of where we had a plural word. We said I already know that it's 2. What does it say 2? To say that they have to be similar. And then we were saying, well, even if they're not similar, it's okay. Right? We made this whole limud from the fact that you had tziporim is memele shtayim. It's, like that. So now, if that's the case, why don't we use the same mahalach and say, by the korban tamid shel shachar, korban tamid shel bein arbaim, nami nema, let's say, kvasim miut. I'm sorry, kvasim. It says, in the context of the korban tamid, kvasim, sheep. Miut kvasim shnayim, atam lo mishnayim. So, of course, the minimum of kvasim, of sheep, is 2. So how come the pasuk has to say explicitly 2? Shiyu shnein shavin. So why don't we say, well, because it'll teach us, like in the other examples, that the 2 sheep every day should be similar. And then we'll say that, and even though, how do we know that even though they're not exactly similar, it still works? Well, therefore it says keves twice to say that even if they're different, it's still okay. But really, right? But what? But really, they should be similar. Why don't we say that by the korban tamid? Why don't we use the same limud by the korban tamid and say that both sheep should be similar? And if they're not, it's okay, but they really should be. So, and for the Gemara, because we have a different thing that we learn out from kvasim, etc. Shnayim layom kineged hayom. Right? It says, of course, by the korban tamid, Shnayim layom o lasamit. So we learn out from Shnayim Layom, 2 during the day, to say that it's Kneged Hayom, that it's like the day. The sun rises in the east. So we bring one in the morning when the sun rises in the east, and the evening when it sets in the west. Like the day. To which the Gemara says, wait, how do I know that when it says Shnayim Layom, it means that it's like the day? And we're going to explain what this means in a second. But, basically 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, but also the location of where the animal should be based on where the sun is. How do I know that that's what it means? Maybe it means that Shnayim Layom, you have to bring 2 every day. Nothing to do with the morning, the night, the sun in the east, sun in the west. Nothing to do with that. You have to bring 2 every day. That's it. Well, when the pasuk says that one of them you'll dafka do in the morning, the other one you'll dafka do in the afternoon, oh no, I'm sorry. I keep on mixing that up. So when it says you'll do 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, so that is how I know that you have to do 2 every day. So why does it say dafka Shnayim Layom? What do we learn out from Shnayim Layom? Kneged Hayom. That teaches that it has to be like the day. Ketzad, what does it mean that it has to be like the day? That the Talmud Shel Shachar was slaughtered in the northwestern corner of the Mizbeach HaChitzon, because the sun in the morning rises in the east, which means that it casts a shadow towards the west. And therefore, to stay out of the shadow, he would go about as far west as he can to get out of the shadow, and therefore he would slaughter the Korban Tamid in the north of the Azar, because all Kodshei Kodshim are Shchitas and Batzafon, you have to slaughter in the north. But it would also be Dafka the northwest, to get as far west as he can out of the shade. And then when he's slaughtering it, there were these rings on the floor of the Azara, so they would not use the one closest to the Mizbeach, but the second one. And the afternoon offering was slaughtered in the northeastern corner on the second ring, also to get it as far east as you can go, because the sun was setting in the west and casting a shadow towards the east, so go as far east as you can to stay out of the shadow. And then the Brisa then concludes, and it's not clear if this is a chova or nice to have. Rashi says that it's a mitzvah; it's more of like a nice to have. Put that on Shabbos. The kvasim for the musaf, those should actually look similar. Those should look similar. So we see that we have a separate limud when it comes to the Korban Tamid that we learn out from kvasim. So we don't do that mahalach that we did with the goats of Yom Kippur and the sheep of the Mitzorah, etc. All right, sounds fun. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Shnei Seirei Yoma Kippurim sheshachatan b'chutz. You hear that, friends? Shchutei chutz, slaughtering kodshim outside of the Azara. So let's say you have these 2 goats, you set them aside, that these are going to be the Seirei Yom Kippur. These are going to be the goats that the Kohen Gadol offers on Yom Kippur. Sar Lashem, Sar Lazazel. And then you slaughtered them outside of the Azara. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. So if he slaughtered these goats before the lottery happened, so you had set aside these goats, so they're kodsh, right, they're hektish. You had set them aside, but you had not yet done the lottery, and then you slaughtered them outside of the Azara. So chayiv al shneim. So you're going to be chayiv for both of them for shchutei chutz. Mishehigul alein. But once they did the lottery, and we know, and it was determined which one is la Hashem and which one is la Azazel, chayiv al shel shem ufarta al shel Azazel. So in that case, he will be chayiv for the goat that is la Hashem, and will be pater for the goat that is la Azazel. Let's go weiter, shtickle. Now, frag the Gemara, 1 second. We had just said that if he slaughters both of the goats before the lottery, So he's going to be chai for shchutei chutz for both of them. In order to be chai for shchutei chutz, this has to be an animal that you could offer as a korban right now. So let's say I set aside an animal that it should be, I don't know, an ola or something, and then I slaughter it outside the azar, so that's shchutei chutz, because it's ready right now to be offered as an ola. I slaughtered it outside the azar, it's shchutei chutz, it's a problem. But these two goats that you had set aside to be the Yom Kippur goats, what can I do with them right now? I haven't even done the lottery yet, so I can't use them right now. So then, why, when I slaughter them outside of the azara, am I chai for shchutei chutz if these are animals that aren't able to be used as the for the korban yet? Says Rav Chizda, well, since these goats can be used, yeah, sure, not for the avoda in the Kodesh HaKodashim, for the Sar Lashem, Sar Lazazel, because the lots haven't been done yet. That would have to be done first. However, there's a korban musaf that you could, right, that's offered on Yom Kippur. And these animals could be offered, could be used, as they are right now, they could be used for the musaf offering on Yom Kippur. And that is why you're chayiv for shchutei chutz when you slaughter these goats, even though you have not yet done the lottery, because, yeah, they might not be usable as for the Sar Lashem and Sar Lazazel pre-lottery, but as they are, you can use them already for the korban musaf on Yom Kippur. Umayshna l'sara naisa b'fnim dilo t'mechusar agrala. But the Gemara says, 1 second. But how come we're saying that these goats you'd be chai for shchutei chutz since they could be used as the korban musaf? But how come we're not saying, wait, that you're chai because they could be used as the Sar Lashem? Because you haven't yet done the agrala? Well, guess what? La Sara naisa b'chutz nami lo chazid mechasu avodas hayom. Fact the Gemara, but technically you also can't use these goats for the korban musaf either, because you haven't yet done the avodas hayom. It's not yet time to offer the korban musaf. You first have to do the avodah and the Sar Lashem, Sar Lazazel. So kilu, just like you can't use these goats for the Sar Lashem because you haven't done the lottery yet, well, you also technically can't use them for the korban musaf either because you haven't done the avodah hayom of Yom Kippur yet. So the Gemara answers, Ksav Rav Chizda ein mechusar zman levo bayom. So the Gemara answers, well, Rav Chizda holds that there isn't mechusar zman levo bayom. For same day, we don't consider it not yet its time. Meaning, since the korban musaf is going to be offered that day, yes, you're going to be doing the avodah of the Sar Lashem, Sar Lazazel first. But since it's all going to happen on that day, it's not considered mechusar zman, and therefore we consider it as though these korbanos can be, these animals can already be used as is. And therefore, if you slaughter these goats pre-hagrala, pre-lottery, you'll be chayiv for both, for shchutei chutz for each of the goats, because each of the goats could be used for the korban musaf that day as is. If it's post-hagrala, if the lottery has already been done and it's already been determined which one is Lashem and which one is Lazazel, well then the one that's Lashem is ready to be offered as a korban Lashem. And therefore you'll be chai for shchutei chutz for the one that is Lashem. The one that's Lazazel, you're not going to be slaughtering as a korban, you're going to be dropping off a cliff somewhere. So therefore if you slaughter that one outside of the Azara, you're going to be potter for shchutei chutz because this isn't something that was going to be offered as a korban in the Azara. Amar Ravina, says Ravina, Ashad Amar of Chizda mechusar agrala k'mechusar ma'aseh dami. Says Ravina, now that Rav Chizda is clearly, his opinion is that since, in the event that the lottery has not yet been done on these goats, so it's considered a mechusar ma'aseh, it's lacking something in doing the korban, and therefore therefore you can't be chai for shchutei chutz for the Sar Lashem, since the lot has not yet been done yet, and he has to say it's because of the korban musaf. Well, then, Hada Amar of Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Well, that which Rav Yehuda says the name of Shmuel Shlam Sheshachton Kodem Shnitchu Dalsus Ahechel Psulin. That if you slaughter a korban shlamim before the doors to the heichel have been opened yet, psulin. That korban shlamim is possible. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, "Ushchatu pesach ha'amoed," that you'll slaughter by the entrance to the ha'amoed bismanchu pasuach v'lo bismanchu no. It has to be pesach ha'amoed. It has to be when the ha'amoed is open, not when the ha'amoed is closed. And therefore, if you slaughter a korban shlamim before the doors of the heichel are open, it's possible. Well, in shachton b'chutz kodem shniftechu dasus heichel pater. My time mechusar psicha k'mechusar ma'asadami. Well, says the Gemara, if Rav Chizda is saying that when you haven't yet done the lottery, it's considered like mechusar ma'aseh, even though it's not something specifically related to the goat itself. It's more like a meta thing. You have to do the lottery to determine what the goat is in the first place. So, based on that, we want to say, well, also when it comes to the gates of the heichel being open, that we say that if you slaughter a korban shlamim when the gates of the heichel are not yet open, when the door to the heichel is not yet open, so the korban shlamim is possible, even though the gate of the heichel is not directly related to the korban itself, it's more of like a meta kind of thing. So also we would say that if you slaughter a shlamim outside of the azar, so it's shchutei chutz, but it's pre the gate, the doors of the Eichel being open, the doors of the Eichel are not yet open. So I would say also that it wouldn't yet be considered Shchutei Chutz because it's lacking a Maisa. Just like the lottery would be considered a Maisa, so also the Heichel, the doors of the Eichel being open would be considered a Maisa that's necessary to be done in order to enable this korban. And if you slaughter the korban before the doors of the Eichel are open, it would be considered Mechusar Maisa, and you would be pater for Shchutei Chutz Chevre. That was Daf Samach Beis of Masechta Yoma. So the Daf began with saying that in the event that like the blood spilled out from the goat, so we bring new ones. So we say that there's machlokas between Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar on the one hand who say that all of the goats that we now had, that you had to slaughter because the blood kept on spilling on the floor. So you schlep them out to the outside of the shalosh machnos and you burn them, and whoever burns them, his clothing becomes tameh until the evening. We said that now, as we slaughter these Sarah Lashems, we also are accumulating Sarah Lazazels. So Rava asked Rav Nachman, how many of these Sarah Lazazels do we take out? So we basically proved that because it says Oso, you're only going to be taking out one of them. Okay? Now which one? So Rav Papi says in the name of Rava, based on Rav Yossi, that you take out the first one because mitzvah barishon. Whereas Rav Shimi says in the name of Rava, you take out the last one, since the last one is the one that sort of really got us past the finish line. That was the one associated with the Sarah Lashem that you applied its blood to the Mizbah Chazav ultimately. We started a new parak. We learned that the goats on Yom Kippur should really all look the same, have the same height, have the same value. We had a whole thing about, but if they look different, it's still okay. We applied that also to other scenarios. And then we discussed Shchutei Chutz, which is interesting, and we said that if you slaughter the goats of Yom Kippur outside of the Azara, so that's what's called Shchutei Chutz. So if it's pre-lottery, so then if it's pre-lottery, so you'll be chai for both of them, because Rav Chizda says they could theoretically be used for the Korban Musaf. If it's post-lottery, you'll be chai for the Sarah Lashem, because that's ready to be offered in the Beis Hamikdash. You'll be part of it for the Sarah Lazazel, because the Sarah Lazazel isn't ultimately going to be offered in the Beis Hamikdash. Chevre, that was Daf Samach Beis of Masechta Yoma. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day. Cheers.